Hello, my name is Joseph McMahon. I played Joseph McMahon on the hit web series Am I Hungry or Am I Bored? On last week's episode, things got a little crazy, and we had a lot of laughs, but some of those came at the expense of making light of a very serious issue: caffeine addiction.
Did you know that more than 90% of Americans consume caffeine every day? Or that 30% of adults require more than 3 cups of coffee to get up in the morning? Or that a single acre of green space contains more than 50,000 spiders? If you live in the countryside, you are literally covered in spiders right now. Go ahead, check.
So if you think you or someone you love is suffering from a serious caffeine addiction, please call 1-800-DUDE-BRO-GET-SOME-HELP-BRO. That's 1-800-383-3276, 438-7663-4357-275. Again, that number is 1-800-383-3276, 438-7663-4357-275. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the next episode of Am I Hungry or Am I Bored? I am your host, Joseph McMahon, and this is part 2 of Pie-mageddon. Last week we started with dessert, as you always should, and blueberry pie. But this week we go to the main event, cast iron pan pizza. Now, it is very important, above all else, that you have one thing for this recipe, and that is a 10-inch cast iron skillet. If you do not have one, this will not work properly. You can make it in something else, but it'll come out crap, and you'll be like, Joe, you led me astray again, and I'll be like, no, I clearly stated at the beginning of the video that you needed a 10-inch cast iron skillet. You didn't listen to me, why not? And you're like, well, I don't actually listen to you with the sound on, I just watch you do funny things on the screen in the background. And I'm like, that's kind of bullshit. I put a lot of work into these films. You should watch them with the sound on, otherwise it's just me recording myself, listening to myself talk, which I enjoy, but it's still kind of rude, so why don't you not do that? So, let's assume that you have your 10-inch cast iron skillet, and we will go look at some ingredients over here at this portion of the kitchen right now. Here we go. Now, this recipe is going to make 2 pan pizzas. You're going to want 400 grams of bread flour, that's about 2.5 cups, 10 grams of kosher salt, that's about 2 teaspoons, 4 grams of instant yeast, that's about a teaspoon. Again, though, I've only got fresh yeast, which is supposed to be used at 2 or 3 times the amount. So I split the difference and used 10 grams of the fresh yeast. You want 275 grams of room temperature water, that's about 1 cup and 3 tablespoons. 8 grams of extra virgin olive oil, that's about 2 teaspoons. And then for our sauce, we're going to want 1 28-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes, a tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of unsalted butter, 2 cloves of garlic, which I don't have, so I'm using dried minced garlic instead. So I've got about a teaspoon of that, a teaspoon of oregano, a pinch of red pepper flakes, a pinch of kosher salt, 2 sprigs of fresh basil, a medium onion, which we're going to cut in half and peel, and a teaspoon of sugar. So we're just going to go ahead and add all our ingredients in. So there's our flour, our salt, our olive oil, and then our water and our yeast. And again, because I'm using fresh yeast, I actually dissolved it into the water first just to make sure it doesn't clump up. And then all we're going to do is use a wooden spoon and mix this until it comes together. And there you go. You got a nice little craggy ball of dough. We're just going to cover this in saran wrap and let it sit for 8 to 24 hours room temperature. So while we wait for the dough, let's move on to the sauce. The first step is to take that can of whole peeled tomatoes and puree it with whatever you got. That can be a food mill, that can be a food processor, that can be an immersion blender. That's what I used. Now you might well ask me, Joe, why didn't I get a can of pureed tomatoes or crushed tomatoes in the first place? You can totally do that. The general idea is the less processed the food, the better. So we're going to put our saucepan on medium. We're going to throw in our tablespoon of butter and our olive oil and just whoop, whoop. Oh, wow, that's a mess. And just wait for that to melt. All right, so now we're going to add in our garlic, our oregano, our red pepper, and the salt. Let it cook for a couple of minutes, and then we can go ahead and just dump everything else in. Our 28-ounce can of tomatoes. Woo! 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 Ah! Ah! Hey, look, hot oil. It hurts. Who would have thunk, people? We're gonna throw in our teaspoon of sugar give a little sweetness. Our basil. Our 2 halves of a peeled onion. So we're going to reduce this to low and let it simmer for about an hour. At which point, if you want, the recipe has you throw out the onions and the basil, or, you know, you can keep the onions, chop up the basil, and put it on your pizza later. All right, so it is roughly 24 hours later. You can see our dough has poofed up and gone all bubbly. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take this out and dump it onto a well-floured surface and break it into 2 balls. One we're gonna use now, one we'll put in the fridge for later. And you're just gonna sort of fold it under, make it into a ball, get a nice smooth finish on top. Like so. Look at that. Get it up, get off, get it. So now with the second ball, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fold into a ball, and then we're going to put it straight into our cast iron skillet with about, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to soak it on both sides and then let it rise for another 2 hours. About halfway through that, you're going to crank your oven to 550 degrees, or as high as it'll go, with the rack in the middle position. Alright, same situation. We're going to get it nice and smooth on the outside. Alright, we're going to just take that bottom, sort of pinch it together. We're going to take our cast iron skillet. We're going to throw some olive oil in here. Pretty side down first, just smoosh it around. Flip it over, make sure it's fully covered in the oil. Just move it around the pan, make sure the pan gets fully oiled. And then you're just going to press down firmly. Move this a little closer. Whoop! The palm of your hand. Don't worry about getting it all the way to the edges now. This is just for the initial rise, and we can stretch it more later. And it's magically 2 hours later. So you can see the dough has mostly filled out the pan now. And just to get the rest of the way, we're just going to use our fingertips. Try to smush it down, spread it out a bit more. Get it towards the edges. You also, just in case there are air bubbles underneath, you're just going to want to lift it up. Whoop, boop, stretch it out a bit. You see any big bubbles, just sort of pop them. Boop, 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 boop. So now normally if we were making like a New York style pizza, right? I'd say less is more, don't go crazy on the toppings. But with a pan pizza, you actually want to weigh it down. So you can go crazy, right, with your toppings. So the recipe calls for like 3/4 of a cup of sauce. But again, as much as you're comfortable with. We'll go with 3/4 and see what that gets us. And you can take this all the way to the edge, people. There's no crust, all right? This whole thing should be smothered in sauce and cheese and toppings. And then we'll throw on, again, as much cheese as you want. I don't even know how much this recipe recommends. I just take handfuls until I decide that I've had enough. We're gonna throw on some pepperoni. So much pepperoni. I go with stick pepperoni. Just because I like getting the pepperoni to curl and make little grease cups. Slightly more unhealthy than normal pepperoni. Boar's head is what I usually go with if I can find it, but you know, any sort of pepperoni will frankly do you okay. I took some of the onions and the basil from the sauce we made, chopped that up, so we'll just sort of throw a little bit of that all over the place. Goopy basil, And then we're gonna pop this in the oven. Again, it's been preheating for an hour at 550 degrees, and we'll stick it in there for 12 to 15 minutes. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Oh. The next step here, of course, is to make sure that the bottom is done to your crunchiness level. So, if you have a thin metal spatula or one of these things used for pastry stuff, you can just go around the outside edge. Oh, look at that. Nice and crispy. Now, if it is not as crispy as you'd like it, you can just turn on the stove like medium and let it cook there for a few minutes, and that'll finish up the bottom of the crust. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with another final product for your view. Here's the side view. Let's get the bottom view for you. Look at that crispy, crunchy crust. All right. No hat for me today, it's too hot, folks. Fair warning, if you choose to cook pizza in the oven in the summer when it's already super hot out, I highly recommend you not forget to turn the AC on after you turned it off last night to save money. Cause boy howdy will your kitchen get hot. But that's not why you're here, folks. You're here for this. Aha. Ah. Oh. Oh, man. Oh, that's good. That is, whew, that is super hot. I'm gonna have some car wash mouth later. That is good. Fun fact, car wash mouth is a phrase that was given to me by my Aunt Susan. That's where you burn your mouth and you have little pieces of flesh hanging down like a car wash. It's disgusting, but now you'll never be able to forget it. Yeah, this is super delicious, guys. Super delicious. Ah. Honestly, it probably did not need the extra minute on the stove over the burner, but that's fine. I've been using this recipe for years, and this is absolutely something that I recommend you make. I'm Joe McMahon, and this is Am I Hungry or Am I Bored? Ciao!